One of the biggest draft slides in NFL history took place in the 2025 NFL Draft when quarterback Shedeur Sanders fell all the way from his early first-round projection to the 5th round to the Browns. As you know, Shedeur is the oldest son of Hall of Famer Deion Sanders, who was also his coach at Colorado. Shedeur's draft position wasn't locked in like Miami quarterback counterpart Cam Ward's was. However, it was mostly agreed upon by draft analysts and scouts that he would not only be the first-round pick, but he was worth one as well. Shedeur certainly had his weaknesses coming out, but he also had elite accuracy and ball placement, and NFL scouts generally thought that he could go somewhere in the top 10. Unfortunately for Sanders, this was not the case, and 5 quarterbacks ended up going ahead of him, one to the same team as him. I'm going to go into why I think his draft slide happened and what I think his future in the NFL looks like now. Shedeur was predicted to go to a few different NFL teams, but the most notable one of these being the New York Giants, as they held the 3rd overall pick and were in desperate need of a quarterback after the failed Daniel Jones situation. Also notably, Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen are on the hot seat and needed to make some kind of wave this season if they wanted to secure their jobs for the 2027 season. New York seemed like the perfect situation until news about Sanders' draft interview with them broke. Supposedly, this interview was one of the worst pre-draft interviews in history and completely threw Daboll and his staff off of the Shedeur hype train. A New York analyst is quoted saying the interview was the worst interview he's witnessed as a scout, and following it up with calling Shedeur just not that good. Now, the details of this interview aren't quite clear, but it is very clear that Shedeur does not want this footage released, as he's reportedly threatened legal action if it is. This interview was so bad, in fact, that the Giants made their move and traded into the first round to select a quarterback, which we all thought was going to be Shedeur Sanders at the time, and as everybody waited with bated breath, they selected Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart with the 25th pick instead of Shedeur Sanders. Now, to be fair, the publicity on Shedeur isn't all bad, with one scout even calling the criticisms on Shedeur mind-boggling, and that he even displays humility at times, which is a side of the media that we don't hear from too often. As a player on the field, I always viewed Shedeur as a solid prospect with lots of upside and overall worth first-round pick. NFL scout Lance Zierlein's analysis on him agreed, as he lists him as a projected first-rounder and goes on to say that he would become a solid game manager in the NFL if he's able to clean some stuff up. Even the President of the United States commented on draft night when Shedeur dropped out of the first round and called NFL owners stupid directly if they did not draft Sanders. Now, I know that he's not exactly a football analyst, but the fact that this story reached all the way to the White House is pretty shocking. Shedeur can complete most throws on the field. He has great pocket shiftiness. He displayed the ability to hit receivers in stride and throw the ball into some tight windows. However, some analysts even disagreed with that, saying that he creates pressure too often and was spoon-fed by his father, Deion Sanders. Personally, I think from a football perspective strictly, Shedeur has gone through enough trials, and they would mostly disprove that. Shedeur originally committed to a small school, FAU, and then flipped to Jackson State once his father took the coaching job. He lit up Division II, and he earned himself a spot in Division I college football. I think that whether Deion was the coach at Colorado at the time or not, I think Shedeur would have ended up at a D1 school regardless, and I believe that he fought his way from D2 to D1, just like we've seen a lot of other quarterbacks do before. But he's had those trials and he's faced that adversity. It's clear, though, that his attitude off the field outweighed what he was able to do on it, as all 32 teams passed on him 4 times until the Browns scooped him up in the 5th round. This means quarterbacks like Tyler Shuck from Louisville, Jalen Milroe from Alabama, and Dylan Gabriel from Oregon all went ahead of Shedeur despite having a lower draft grade. After the incident, former Bengals star quarterback Boomer Esiason had this to say.
They took him off, and they took him off because the owner said take him off. I don't want that guy. Shedeur Sanders just torpedoed himself. His attitude off the field at the combine, his dad didn't help him either. You know, he was on podcast talking about, this is my son. If I can get him to where I want to get him to, I'm going to do that. But, you know, when you listen to this kid talk right prior or at the combine about if you want a new culture in your locker room, I'm the guy to do that. I can turn it around. I mean, he's very high on himself. And I think he was very off-putting to many coaches and general managers in the league. And I'm telling you right now, and I know this after talking to 3 different personnel people in the NFL this weekend, they didn't even have him on their board. They took him off. And they took him off because the owner said, take him off. I don't want that guy. I don't want this entitled person on our team. And I don't blame him.
Apparently, the pre-draft attitude was so bad that most teams didn't even have him on their draft board, a list that contains well over 150 prospects all around the country. Comments from Shedeur like the NFL teams better be ready to change their culture if they pick me clearly did not land well on NFL GMs and owners, as they had no problem passing up on him numerous times. One landing spot was potentially going to be the Vegas Raiders, who minority owner and NFL legend Tom Brady reportedly had a strong relationship with Deion Sanders. However, they too decided to pass up on him 4 different times, along with other teams even getting the impression from him and his father that he was intentionally trying to blow the pre-draft interview, as he had no intention going or landing in that particular spot. Whatever the case may be, Shedeur now has to 100% earn his spot, as he's in a Browns quarterback room that consists of 4 other quarterbacks: Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and the quarterback taken ahead of Shedeur, Dillon Gabriel. From what I've heard so far, Shedeur has looked pretty good in rookie minicamp. However, he has not earned first-team reps yet, as those belong to Kenny Pickett and Dillon Gabriel. Shedeur is now in one of those toughest spots he could be in as a rookie. He's in a position where he has so much to prove, but not as much to lose now. I think that he's in a position where he can truly thrive, as a lot of pressure from being a first-round pick has been lifted off his shoulders, and all he's expected to do now is to go in and compete. I think that being said, as the season begins to kickstart in a few months and the off-season training camps lift off pretty soon, it's going to come down to either Joe Flacco or Shedeur Sanders, in my opinion, as Cleveland's starting quarterback for 2026. If Shedeur ends up panning out, then the Browns finally did something right, and they could have landed a future starting quarterback on a 5th-round contract and have nothing to lose if he ends up being a locker room cancer.